everybody. Hi, good evening. Above all gratitude, this reading has taken a lot of turns in the years, the months, the weeks that we first kind of came up with the idea. And as with many of the readings that we've done with Books Are Magic, it's above all a celebration, right? It's a celebration of new work. It's a celebration of the ways in which multiple cultures, multiple languages, multiple aesthetics, multiple styles, multiple identities and personalities are all in conversation and in rivalry. And as someone who loves the work that's coming out of the UK, loves the work that's coming out of the US and all the assorted kind of like galaxies therein, tonight is the kind of lineup that is reaffirming in a time of great woe. You have ahead of you an amazing array of writers. And we were joking earlier, like my job here is just to be the hype person. It's just to hype y'all up because this is going to be an amazing, amazing night. And if you're curious about the lineup is essentially curated by way of my own curiosity and my own admiration for these writers. What you have here, what we have here, what we're lucky enough to have is a group of writers whose work is both cosmic and intimate, a group of poets who are able to reckon with the woe of the world around us, and at the same time approach that woe with a kind of awe, a kind of reverence, and a kind of willingness to grapple with history. And so I feel really blessed to know the work of these writers. I'm blessed to be the kind of vector of welcoming all of you to listen to them too. And so I'm just going to begin after that contextualization with the work of two poets who I think are in conversation with the poets who are in conversation tonight. The two poets I'm going to read, and then I'll get out of the way so you can just listen to some poems. The work of Kimon Felix and the work of Marwa Hilal. So this is a poem by Kimon Felix called On Entropy. There are more people alive now than there are dead in the earth, an article says. I keep telling myself to invest in entropy, or at least in defining it, in contending with it. Decomposition is a performance of exponential dignity, an act of stripping what life-worn fabrics perforate the borders between lyric and magic. I want to step out of my language and light up. But the body is a container. The body is a mold. I fit snugly. I can barely breathe in here. Leave me. I've got to count the dead in here. I'm an atom and I'm new to the water. I get born by expanding. I get born every day. My flesh is so damn raw with all this entering. And that's Kimon Felix. This is by Marwa Hilal, and I think these two kind of catalysts will get us started on what is going to be an amazing evening. This is Marwa Hilal. It's called Let's Get This Out of the Way. Let's get this out of the way. I find it impossible to compensate for these long absences in any way. I have spent all my life leaving. I have made an art of it. Now, to study returning. These places don't go anywhere, but we do. Passion is specific. Love is not linear. The brightest years were the darkest years. The darkest years were the brightest years. I feel my absence. I feel my presence. Brevity implies intimacy. Brooklyn, New York is the place I've lived the longest in my life. I once calculated the total percentage spent here. It came to 17. A barely respectable dining tip in this city. And over the past 7 years, I've watched my face age slowly in the reflection of train windows. Distance is the story I've always wanted to tell. So I'll tell it now. So tonight, we're going to hear poets wrestle with entropy and the falling apart of things. And tonight, we'll hear poets bridge and explore the distance the distances and the stories of distances. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. Enjoy.
Is it me up, I think? Yeah. Thank you so much, Ron. You literally are the best hype man, like the hype man for every pandemic. I'm so happy to be here celebrating Will. And thank you all for tuning in with us today. I'm going to read just a couple poems. Naming ceremony. My father, who spends most of his days painting pictures, says coming home to my mother stroking out was like walking in on an affair. Bending, he demonstrates how an aneurysm hugged her to her knees. Over and over, my father draws a loss so big it is itself an inception, a story he knows better than the day his daughters were born. Every retelling different, bluer than redder. His memory bruising the neck of whomever he can will to listen. His heart is strong. He has the receipts, a scar on his breast that I've cleaned like a smudge on a window. Over and over, my father draws me a picture of the crescent moon fishhooking her hospital room. He loses the story for the pleasure of finding it. His tongue, the builder of a maze. I can tell you, our best days weren't glad. He's a history whittled down to this single story. In my version, when her mind blew, boys I barely knew played Beirut, cans of Paps crushed against their shoulders, white balls flicking into crimson solo cups, the night lost to the drawl of a far gone gurney. Naturalized citizen. Mouthing amendments, our mother studied the Constitution. Her whisper, not English, not her house a tongue, but something lower, a car revving its engine. Our mother memorized presidents, capital cities, adopted habits like moving her green card from one closet to another, kept a manila folder for every year of her life. In the kitchen, she turned cream of wheat into tuo shinkafa, could kuka until her Catholic school jumpers stunk of crushed baobab leaves. She'd spend days in her garden refusing to explain anything but the marigolds. In America, no one would say her name correctly. I watched it rust beneath the salt of so many tongues, like a pile of crushed Chevys. At night, she prayed to Allah for something from America that was more than children. Come weekends, we were counting the naira in her underwear drawer. From her calling cards, we learned nagode meant thank you, kai, everything else. Then I'm going to read one more. Thank you. Alabama Parable. My father leans down the barrel of a shotgun house and looks in both directions. At one end, my great-grandfather is leaking like smoke from my aunt's room, where in her body he has left the smell of fire. At the other end, my grandmother, Gussie May, a bull reluctantly bound to her matador. It is barely a secret that this man is the one thing all the women in my family have in common. My father calls it a night so dark the dark could have been broken. Teaches me the hardest thing is to be loved by a woman you can't protect. My father looks down the barrel of a shotgun house, sees in my grandmother, hurt like prayer is a kneeling position, sees that fearing the wrath of God can make you name any angry man king. He still hesitates during a storm because once upon a time, thunder meant the Lord was working. Warns his girls to recognize the certain mold that marks men willing to pay for moonshine but never rent. Says to go for the knees, throat, eyes. He moves like his whole life depends on superstition. Sleeps like he's listening for the creaking door, the smoke signals, the witnesses to my aunt's fires. 72 and tired of keeping secrets. Every Christmas, my father gifts me another, each an heirloom wrapped tightly in his mouth. Lesson 1, there's no God in Alabama. Lesson 2, where the road forks between faith and survival. Lesson 3, no, my grandmother did the best she could. The kill shot, to leave a wounded thing with its heart still beating. Thank you.
Thank you, Hafizah, and thank you, Ron, Ricardo, and Will. Also, thank you, and Will, congratulations on your book. Thank you to Serena and Nika and everyone at Books Are Magic for hosting us tonight. I'm just gonna dedicate this reading to my aunt, whose birthday it is today, and who is also the first poet I knew. And I'm gonna read 3 poems. Big questions. Why this insistence on the century? Why keep returning to fields where human beings died? It should be enough to watch the sulfur lights turn on and off through the window. Down the street, lights go on in houses too. But I know the century was everywhere. Every house has hands, every hand is a flower, every flower marks a grave, every grave is 5 graves. All those everyones, everywhere, always, even now. How is this day different from any other? The fields have been moved in hopes that no one will see them. Some people are seeing the fields, of course, but the idea is not to see them. Watch the orange lights fade on against the darkening sky. The far-off people in the fields move in their slow dresses. The century watches them. In the blue darkness, we have been imagining the century far away. The century is among us now. It moves with a force we can barely estimate. The hand of the century touches us. No place is too far, it says. The other 2 poems I'm going to read are not published. They are in paper. And they're both about the color pink to some extent. Pink list. When I make lists of names, I dread the ones that I forget. Éireann Lorsung. Pink, a condition of the text, not a particularly feminine condition, in the sense that feminine said that way is originary, fixed, and becomes necessary of us. I'm running my hands over the bodies of Roland Barthes and Jacques Derrida, same hands that pick strawberries kneeling in a field in eastern Minnesota next to a girl I'll call Chelsea. I am running through the corn in St. Paul at midnight with boys whose names are a mystery to me now, next to whom I slept, with whom I ate, whose music I stole. A girl with vines in her hair accompanies me. I call her S. I put my hands in the jar of honey. I walk through the old orchards, calling for the ones I know. Clover, thyme, rosemary, black locust, alfalfa, linden, apple, hawthorn, goldenrod. The bees are coming in and out as they like, teaching me to be in the world. Condition of the text, perpetual forgery. Intercession, a woman in a long turquoise dress with the sun in her hair. Pink, an indelible fruit, entrail of the world. I've been paying attention to embroidery on plain houses here. When I said feminine before, I meant something I'm not sure we can understand. In a hallway, I stood under a chandelier and Caroline climbed a ladder to pick the big round crystals like it was a fruit tree. I'm hoping that the poets and other people in the world will find time to fall in love more than once and not descend the basement stairs saying they've forgotten something and shoot themselves in the head, while outside the rare blush dogwood blooms a pale peach like the inside of someone's leg. Pink, the almond trees blooming and constellations. Pink in your old photograph, the one in which the philosopher is already certainly dead. Pink, the solitude of being in love or of being alone, the bed with quilts and books or a bigger bed. And the third poem I'm going to read is an alphabet poem, a form that I love. So it's 26 pieces, and it's called 26 Objects. An emptiness in the shape of Elsa, where we walked hand in hand in the Cambridge snow, anywhere we went together, simple fractals falling around us, night and ice and salt and vapor, a city crystallized in breath after breath. Breath filling umbrellas in the shade along beaches, and where we ran into the water, the white foam gathering in pools. Come in, she said, come, come, and the water flooded backwards in slow motion across the low tide, out beyond Calais. Calais, border city on the border of nothing and something, or you have been waiting for this, a tunnel in which the possible begins to appear if the body can only be made to run fast enough, that's to say, faster than a train. Dear me, dear you, dear. Dear emptiness, out there on the 50 miles of channel before the coast, I've been waiting a while for you to come back in the room, and after so long it appears the house I built for you is big enough only for myself, for me, Éireann. Éireann and Elsa, visible girl and invisible girl, girl the size of a nation, which means as long as from 1916 to now, going forward and backward, or the exact shape of a burned out house in Belfast, from which was retrieved one iron wind-up rabbit, rust filigreed. Filigreed of morning light on a September wall, just one symptom of time moving through space, but how precious it becomes, like a fading paper umbrella, as if childhood could be contained in one object, and the geese were not flying south this afternoon, going, gone. Gone, as in the thread when the spool is empty, but the empty spool we all knew became a thing to desire unto itself. Bart taught me about desire suspended between shown and concealed, now thread, now wooden spool, now available, now hid. Hidden in the habit of the tall, thin priest in the year 1938, when walking down a train platform in Belgium takes on a less innocuous air. We were all moving in all directions, and wind blew along the priest's legs, causing each hair to stand up, a little field of I. I held the miniature champagne bottle in my hand at the dinner table, foreignness my excuse for my behavior, but my powerful 10-year-old self had wanted it from the minute the cake it decorated appeared. Quiet, I whispered to myself. How je jeune? Je jeune, a historical instance of private dialect. I had it mean in just my body, something between young and yellow, like the first low rising thumbnail moon of October, perfect, magical, quiet, eminent, a thing impossible to emulate, communal, and totally unkept. Keeping earnestly to the rules. In fact, unaware that one could run through corn at midnight or swim naked in any lake, even those with signs, for the price of a small risk, I pocketed alder cones and, just like a button on a card of likewise buttons, stood in line. Lines are what hold the universe together, such as the line a snowflake might make as it passes from space to earth, and the line of breath on a very cold night. Or lines are the most practical way to cross under a small piece of ocean, maybe. Maybe in the morning, while the dream of empty jars and snow shining through city midnights dissipates, your mother on the other side of the Atlantic is wondering how you choose the hymns for the wedding you won't have, not now, probably never. Never is the silk a spider drops from her own abdomen, and the crane flies frantic fluttering against glass. Never is the hollyhock stance against an early cold. Never an anonymous, a fennel stalk against sky. Oh, and oh. Oh, exclamation, antiphon, overdriven, exorbitant, reminder, you are too much. Magenta cosmos rising out of nothing, old hopes, a dry summer relieved finally by rain. We sat in the room dominated by the large glass, each of us covered by sunset, pinked, bepinked. Pink pressure in the frontal lobe, where the blood first cut off oxygen. Is her risk-taking a stroke change, or does she just know firsthand now how close we live to death, so cut the bullshit? Pink is the most beautiful thing I can think of. Perfect human quality. Quality of line, both vertical and horizontal, an average disavowing the diagonal, the flax field available at 9 a.m., wind stirring it to image of ocean, is flower. Later, the lines lie on the field, an even herringbone rotting into fiber, that is, linen follows ret. Retting by dew or ambient water requires careful judgment. The flax farmer knows things I cannot know or even explain, and I trust this. So I can't discount that people here in Maine know things I don't about their here. Look just everywhere for smarts. Smarts are insufficient, she said, turning back to her computer. I sat at my desk and felt like a fraud. When things come easily, I think I'm really dumb. Most of my education made me a contrarian. I believe it and I don't. Body thinks, gut thinks, brain thinks. Think about light on that wall and the odor of peach leaves steeped in strong alcohol and the time we walked into the mountains together and the fact that we can love people we only meet once. None of it impossible, only unlikely. Unlike France, where my assimilation was predicated on a general disregard for my interior language, and thus I quickly became fluent, here among the flax fields in Flanders is still a novelty that the foreigner can speak their language. Eigenlijk zeer goed. Very well, very. Very early in the morning, I went out with the cat, and there was an immense regenboog across the whole sky. On Instagram, the hashtag regenboog showed it moving from here all the way to Ypres, almost to the border, that far west. And west of here is water I love, the North Sea, however dirty and trafficked, where I was rebaptized in mist and foam, where my heart hovers among tents wiped out by officers of the state, sisters and brothers, your mark, X. X, expressing so little of my affection and eventually drained of excitement, requiring longer and longer strings of XOXOX. Now the beloved brings best only a garden, no written promises. Still, a garden returns and is a form of yes, yes. Yes, yes is the yes, a yes which reaffirms its return even as it is spoken the first time, a spring in language both seasonal and liquid, the running over of the cup which never empties, an unendingness sensed only in action, sunset index of the next day's zenith. Zenith, miswritten traveler whose parents are gravity, staidness, calmness, as well as a sense of direction, handed into Old French by Arabic astronomers. An imaginary dome. Still, I have written on it, in blue ink, among gold stars, my welcome to whoever passes here. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Éireann. Hafizah, Ron, I always feel like when I'm in your context, I feel like I'm in a version of home. So it's really comforting to be here now with all of you. Will, can't wait to hear you read. Congratulations. And everyone else, hello. I will be reading a new poem and a few poems from my book. But I'm going to start with I can't call them the old ones because the book just came out, but I don't tend to read some of these poems. This is one of the oldest poems in my manuscript, Layaway. First, we would give in to disloyalty with slack exchanges. We were figuring what it might be like to live knowing intimately conflicts with size. Look, my life is not what I would like it to be. This year, mornings imply an act of bravery. Look, the window displays are changing. We could prove what we have yet to dispraise. All the males have mated and move on in the city's red gloss. Mi mamá me ama. I have a moon. I had 6 mothers in my poverty. Is this all I have for myself? I was born like everyone else in a house with one door. I have memories to revise. No doubt you'll find the expiration date. Mi mamá me ama. I laid waste to my health in the walls of her heart while regretting this analogy for the labor of a body. I had a house with 3 windows. I remembered her alone with her memories of youth. The deep-hearted course of one rough word turned judgment in my blood. It was mother. As for her, this is the truth. When she cries for her mother, I dismantle all walls to extract her with one word. The word was mother. I learned her sacrifice and grace. I had one moon. Mother, teach me when to seek out. I'll note the expiration date. That's how I talked while my mother with fruit fed me. Lesionado. Maybe this will be a poem about power, reading, rereading, whatever shape the intelligence takes. Somewhere, somehow, the men the state somewhere seems to destroy. Only we should be beautiful and practical. Finding beauty will stand everywhere among 2 Victorias, my brother and I among them, home for its noun, home for its soil, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I among them. Maybe this is a poem about power. Maybe this is a poem about love. America, America. In interiors by nightlight and by our own admission, we levitate. It is our birthright. Suppose the cargo was brought for our welfare, a kind of instruction toward ill produce we could not afford. Thoughts about the climate and the waste of our prose disclose the economy of our youth. There were trees the storm had reserved, fathers unmannered at the effort. Our theaters confused the gods. We observed the trees. We never knew the fluttering made them distinct. And then this is a poem that I wrote a while ago, but it's relatively new. It's not in the collection. Most of the poems I read are written in Spanish and then translated into English. But I will read in English because that's what my heart will allow tonight. Had to use 6 words today. If you, America, own, for example, your Brooklyn of absolute gift, reach safely that charter of rights of the Republic, its austerity measures, that charter of oversight, management, and economic stability, suggest we were subject to your dissertation as we were its readers. America, are you the precedent? The sea train in its abstract melancholy? Then forgive us if we lean toward the mystery inside. For example, our brethren called me Capricorn in Bushwick, Spit in Park Slope, suggested translation of my name, but that was in New Jersey. If I were to find one thing inside 6 walls, it would be Marcus, my boss's cat, a deadbolt making my home out of Thanatos, so I may hope to be its human reader. 2 weeks after Maria, I send a text despite keeping no receipt for $3. Oh, America, lay your immense wake over me. I, alone in my room for us, I sing. I, America, whom you are holding now in hand. Book, forgive me everything. I've gotten up in my used sheets, America, at 6 in the morning with a poem in mind. Thank you.
That was really amazing. I feel really honoured to be reading with all of you, Hafizah, Éireann, Ron, Ricardo. Yeah, thank you, Ron, for bringing us all together. This is, I guess, feels particularly special to me to be kind of inducted briefly into this little, into this family, and also to read in America, because so this book came out with Wesleyan, who very kindly published it, and I was hoping to come and kind of help launch it, but for various circumstances we don't need to go into, I wasn't able to come to the US, which I was really looking forward to at this time. Anyway, so it's nice to be here. So I'll just read a few poems from it, and yeah, thanks again. I thought I'd start with it begins with a kind of prayer dedication for my grandma who died during the writing of the book. And our relationship, I guess, like a lot of kind of diasporic relationships, was framed by not being able to communicate. So the title was kind of inspired. It's like by what's called like a false cognate, which is where a word looks the same, but they mean two different things. So rendang is a kind of Indonesian curry, but I always used to confuse it with rending, which is to break apart or even to like bring together. So it's kind of about that and about words and etymologies. In West Sumatra, they call rendang randang. Neither shares a root with rending. Rose and rose have French and Frisian roots you can't hear. Context makes the difference clear. Here lies one whose name was writ in Bahasa. Here are words I've said in memory of her who I could never speak to. Chandra Sari, I call you wrongly, rend me rightly, rootless and unclear. And in a radical change of tone, I wrote, this is a poem called The Seven Dreams of Richard Spencer, which was I never really know how to explain this poem. Essentially, it is what the title is. Richard Spencer is a famous neo-Nazi. He's a bad person, and I thought the thing I could do that would annoy him or like someone like him the most would be to insinuate myself into his dream life and kind of give him these kind of like tender and kind of precious dreams, which we all have, I imagine, even the worst of us. And also ambiguous dreams, which I imagine is the thing that would terrify a fascist the most. So, 7 dreams. 1. Once I woke up with the actual gilded horns of a cuck, and you admired them and assured me I need not fear dreams that pass through the horned gates. But then I turned into a yellow cowfish, flopping on the bed, and you picked me up by my small horns and flushed me down the toilet. 2. Once I believed myself to be a cuckoo, when in fact I was a pair of binoculars looking at a cuckoo. I hung around your neck, swaying on the drive home, where you left me on the seat. There I turned into a mote of dust. The next day, you sat in silence, the churring call of a nightjar outside, while I nested in your eye. 3. Once I was a cucumber, and you pretended I was useful. But when I said I was a Gurkha, speaking German fluently, you tried to pickle me. I remember wanting to turn into a kitten or something cute, but ended up as a novelty keychain for a real estate broker called Big Dicks. 4. Once I was the chlorine in a public swimming pool, and I flowed into the open gills of a woman I believed to be my mother, before it occurred to me that my mother isn't young and doesn't have gills. I turned into a macrophage and was able to see that the woman I believed to be my mother was addled with cancer. So I started to eat my way through every cell I came across, not because I wanted to save her, but because it tasted good. 5. Once Europe was a market square, and though it wasn't market day, I'd come to sit and drink hot chocolate and listen to the buskers, one of whom was singing Schumann's Dichterliebe, which for some reason you thought was bleeding love. It's not, I said. But later, I heard Leona Lewis's voice in the flapping of the pigeons outside the National Museum. The exhibits on loan had been replaced by photographs. Each time I tried to touch one, it moved. You better back the fuck off, said the security guard. I turned into a boy and girl who had lost their parents, and we hugged each other, crying. 6. Once the rain fell in vertical girders, and I thought I could walk between them, pressing my cheek against their cold surface. But a mansion rose about me several floors high, and a voice called, telling me to leave. Father, I said, why have you forsaken me? I turned into a great eyeball, and still he looked away, so I turned into a frog and slipped without a sound into a mill pond. 7. Once I was not myself, or another man, or either of their lips exactly, but the expression of the kiss they shared, and at first I have to say it was beautiful. But then I felt myself turning into, or no, recognizing myself as a desert flower, which was even better. Just going to check the time. Okay, I thought I'd going to read a couple of extracts from this longer poem called All the Birds Your Husband, just short extracts. Partly because this section was inspired by the first and only time I went to New York. And I was just thinking about Chinatowns, how they're kind of similar the world over. As Chinatown in Jackson Heights is really town-sized, more China-like than China, whose steamed buns assume, whose waving kitties assume nothing, not of me. So with Liverpool's Chinese lanterns, tree-tangled knots of them dangling freely outside H&M, they make me think of you. They are not light, but light hosted, shaking. One day, I heard a woman started writing poems to a friend with cancer, not to comfort, but to mock him. And when he died, she wrote poems to his wife, mocked her too. She told her that the birds in her garden were him, her husband, so she would sit outside and feed them stale crumbs until they flapped away. And then she raged. Strange things started happening. Her lights blew, strings snapped on an unused harp. She shouted at the new birds. One of them flew straight into her room, shitting, screaming. What of the poet? She scolded the wife in her most mocking poem yet. No, all the birds your husband. And I'm not sure about timing, but okay. I'm going to read this poem, which is kind of my poem about London, I guess, having grown up in London, lived here my whole life, and which is, I imagine, like any other big city, you have a lot of memories around you at any one point, and also you're very close to a lot of people, namely family, but also quite far. You kind of end up not seeing them, even though you know you could be seeing them a lot of the time. And I tried to write about it. And like with a lot of stuff I end up writing, it also ends up being about other writers as well, and the process of trying to write about something. I always have to feel like I'm kind of feeling my way back into it. And yeah, I think this will be my last one. Half got out. I was reading a poem by Ben Jonson, where a newborn, half got out, sees the city burning and decides to crawl back into his mother's womb. Thine urn, he calls it. It was Tuesday morning. I'd just seen Leo near Leicester Square. He was reading a book by W.S. Merwin, a poet himself newly returned to his dead mother's womb. I was feeling so anxious, Leo said, kind of low. When I started to read him, it felt like I found him at just the right time. I'm not sure, but don't parents always talk about their kids arriving at just the right time, like you might describe finding your flip-flops just before a beach holiday? Yes, I said to Leo. He wrote that poem, didn't he? The sad dad one that starts, my friend says I was not a good son, you understand. I say, yes, I understand. He says, I did not go to see my parents very often, you know. And I say, yes, I know. I love the way the dialogue loops back in on itself, the way you know the poet is really talking to or about themselves. It hurts to read it. It reminds me I could be seeing my parents right now, who live 10 stops away. Yes, half an hour, but I'm not. And what else am I not doing? You have to work though. You have to make a living, don't you? That may be true, I don't know. I left the library in light rain to meet Sophie for a drink at the Chandos. And she told me her granddad used to go to Richmond Park. He used to go to Richmond Park to fish. He was a wireless operating sergeant during the war. It's not like she cares, it's just funny, you know. Even if she had a Victoria Cross taped to her forehead, it wouldn't stop those dickheads at the bar from asking if she's Latina or something. I just fucking hate this city, you understand? I say yes, I understand. But I don't know how to leave it. I say yes, I know, I mean, sorry, I don't know. I don't know how to leave or where I'd even go. I looped back to enter the tube at Leicester Square, stepping over the body of a homeless man to travel further again from my mother's womb to Turnpike Lane. The word interred echoing in my head. How many acres of earth were there above me then? The whole city might have been burning. I could already have been dead. There's no going back, my dad said. But how many times have I crossed the point of no return, only to crawl back down King Street or Goldhawk Road to eat chicken noodle soup and talk about seat cushions from Lidl? Yes, I know they're good value. Thank you for dinner. Thank you. Half got out and half enwombed. I know that's just the way it is. I understand the tube threading me like a complex stitch beneath and through the city, back to the house we've been sharing lately. When I got in, I said, I'm home. And you said, yes, I know. And then you filled the kettle and sat down next to me and said. And that's the end of the poem. Sorry for all the, I realized as I was reading it, quite local references. Thanks.
Well, we all know who Leona Lewis is.
Yeah, Leona Lewis, this like small indie British musician.